Well, oh boy. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Creemee Cast. I have a very special guest here today this afternoon. I have John Rodgers here in the studio, candidate for Lieutenant Governor. Welcome, John.
Thank you, Paul. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for coming down. I know it's, it's that. Was it a little quiet on your end?
No, a little loud.
Okay. How about you tell me when? Is that good right there?
That's pretty good. Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
Well, I know, John, you've been traveling all over the state. You've been, trying to work as much as you can on the farm, but I know how demanding a state Senate campaign can be, and that's even local to just Washington County, which is pretty wild. But you've been traveling all over the state of Vermont this spring and summer, and I'm just so grateful that you took the opportunity and took the time to come here today. I know you're going to be in Northfield tonight.
Yep.
You want to let people know where you're going to be, just in case anyone out there is wondering?
Yeah, absolutely. We're going to be at Good Measure Pub and Brewery from 4 to 6, and then we're headed to the town Republican Party meeting at the library. So we're spending the afternoon in Northfield.
It's pretty cool. Yeah. You're making the rounds. I think you just told me, we were talking a little bit before we went live here. You're saying that, was it yesterday or a couple days ago, you were down in Rutland?
2 days ago, we did an event in Rutland at the Hop and Moose down there. Had some great folks out. 2 of the former mayors, a bunch of the reps and senators all came down. We had a great time in downtown Rutland.
That's pretty awesome. I think, so it sounds like to me, so you're heading in, just to give everybody a little bit of context, you are heading into now the primary, which is August 13th, Tuesday is voting day for anyone out there who doesn't know. And you're squared up against a candidate who's actually from Rutland, Greg Thayer, if I'm not mistaken. He is from the Rutland area anyway. So you've been doing some debates, you've been doing events down in Rutland, and you've come into contact with each other, I'm sure, many times. What's it been like this spring and summer? What are your thoughts? And what are you feeling heading into Tuesday?
Yeah, we're feeling really good. We've made tons of contact with people around the state. Like you said, we've been holding events all over the place. In the last couple of weeks, we've been from St. Albans to Colchester to Rutland and everywhere in between. I'm a little disappointed in my opponent, as he has resorted to making up stuff and spreading stuff that's untrue about me, which is very unfortunate. I have a record. I can defend my record. I'm happy debating people and talking about the issues, but it's unfortunate when people go negative using things that aren't true. So that's a little disturbing. Just really, really satisfied with the outpouring of support, especially when I go down to Rutland, which, like you said, that is his hometown. And to have 2 former mayors, former senator, seated senator, a whole bunch of representatives, past and present, come out to support me. And quite frankly, Paul, I'm a moderate. And some of the Republicans have chastised me for that. Oh, he's not a Republican. He's not a Republican. Well, let's look at the facts. The fact is, we have around 90,000 Republicans in the state of Vermont. We have 250,000 Democrats in the state of Vermont. So is the Republican Party going to keep telling moderate Democrats, we don't want you in our party? Because that is like saying we want to keep losing. If we are ever going to get control of this state and get it on a fiscal path to reality, we have got to get independents and moderates, no matter what party they're from, people who are fiscal conservatives, to join us, or we will not win.
No, I think that's an interesting point, and I've obviously somebody who's involved in somewhat conservative media. I would say I've heard a lot of these types of takes coming from a lot of people. Actually, I heard Greg Thayer on the radio this morning. He was on WDEV, and he was talking a little bit about some of your record as a legislator and maybe the way that you voted on some things. And I know, it's funny. I can't think of any examples that he gave. He might not have given any. However, what are some examples that maybe you're thinking of that he's using or saying, or whether true, untrue? I'm not my job to say. Yeah. I don't know, but just want to hear from your perspective. What I'm
gonna have you tweak that down just to hear more for me, Paul.
Absolutely. Wait a second. Is this one yours?
Well,
2. Are you? Is it? Oh, you know what? You might be on 3.
There you go.
Yeah.
That's better. Now up a little. You're out. Yeah.
Okay, tell me when.
Keep coming up. Right there. Good. Thank you.
Absolutely. I knew it when I changed it.
Maybe that's why it didn't change much the first time.
What are you talking? Okay, now we're good.
Anyways, when the Global Solutions Act, or what the heck ever that thing was called, was first introduced, where I knew it was going to lead to a carbon tax, I was one of the guys fighting against it in committee the whole way, on the floor, fighting against this bill, because I knew how expensive it was going to be. I knew it wasn't going to make any difference in climate change. It's an absurd bill. It's like an illusion. It's like they're trying to pretend they're doing something, and all they're doing is breaking the backs of Vermonters financially. So I went out and I drafted a bill that said, instead of charging people carbon tax or whatever you want to call it, that everybody should be responsible for their own carbon. And the point being, I own a farm.
Yeah.
I provide ecosystem services and carbon sequestration for thousands of Vermonters, and I get nothing for it except a $22,000 tax bill. Why should I get taxed further on a carbon tax when I'm already doing more than my part? So it was kind of a tongue-in-cheek way of saying, okay, you guys, you shouldn't be charging the people that are already doing the right thing for the environment. And so Greg equated that to being the same as the carbon tax, which, he just doesn't understand the legislation. It's unfortunate that he doesn't understand it. And now in his side-by-side comparison, he is saying that my bill led to the carbon tax, and that, basically blaming it on me, when if he knew anything about reality, he would see that I was one of the ones standing up and fighting against it.
So that's the big one that
there's several of them, but
Sure.
That's the one that really bothers me. The other one, he's absolutely right. He said, I supported the capital bill. Well, he doesn't even understand the capital bill. First off, the capital bill keeps all state buildings maintained, right? We need our buildings to be maintained for a bunch of reasons.
Absolutely.
We have state employees in them. They have to be up to standard. It is a Vermont asset. You can't defer maintenance and have the roof start leaking and have millions of dollars worth of damage done. It affects our bond rating. The list goes on and on. But there's also a huge amount of money in the capital bill that comes directly out to our little communities. Helps fund water and sewer projects, educational grants, historic barn grants. I mean, the list just goes on and on. In the capital bill is one of the few bills that passes through the body generally unanimously. So he's picked this thing out, and he said, Rodgers supported the capital bill, and that led to higher taxes. And it's just not accurate. I don't even think he knows what a capital bill is.
Well, I told you this earlier. I think it's maybe tomorrow or some point this weekend. Thayer, he's invited to come down on the show, either here in person or he's going to call in or something like that. We haven't figured it quite out yet. And I'll let him refute. I have no idea. This is one of those things where I'm supposed to be as partisan and nonpartisan as possible, even within a primary. We want to give all of our candidates a fair shake. So I wanted to know what your take was. I mean, I listened to what he has to say. I think a lot of the stuff he's been talking about lately, I can support, and I think that he's just putting on a campaign. I mean, as well as anybody, campaigning is it's very challenging, and I do agree it does kind of stink when people resort to stuff like that. But
and so my point, Paul, is that I have a record. If he wants to attack me on my record accurately, I'm fine defending it.
Sure.
But don't make stuff up. And that's what I'm upset with, is he's got this side-by-side comparison that he's posting on social media and stuff. And it's just not accurate. The things that he's saying that I did and supported, some of them are accurate, some of them are not. Now, when you are campaigning or doing a public service job like lieutenant governor, you better have your facts right.
Of course.
And so, quite frankly, just from what I've seen, he's unqualified for the job because he doesn't even do the research to get his facts right. I'm perfectly capable of defending my record, and I'm not going to say I've never made a mistake, but I have a record. Greg doesn't. Greg has never served, and that's a huge difference right there. Yeah. He says I'm going to do all these things, but he's never done anything. I have. I stepped up, 20 years ago, and I've done this. And this spring, when I saw things going south, I think you came to the rallies, right?
I was there. Yeah.
And so, Citizen John, no money.
You've been stepped away for what, 2 years or 3 years?
4.
4 years at this point. Wow. Yeah.
Stepping away from my job and taking care of my own work. Went down to the State House, helped organize these things, put hundreds of people in the building on my time because I'm a concerned citizen that cares about this state. Greg Thayer wasn't there. And so that's what I'm saying. I'm the guy that has stepped up for the last 20 years and done this work, and I have a record of working across the aisles. And, I'm not supported by Governor Phil Scott for nothing, right? He worked with me. He knows who I am. Jim Douglas, years ago, when he was governor, actually asked me to switch parties. And I said, Jim, I could, but I don't think it's going to serve me well to switch parties because I'm still going to vote the same way. I take care of my constituents. I don't play this partisan politics stuff. And that's why I want to be lieutenant governor. I want to take care of the hardworking men and women of this state that are not being represented in the building. And I don't care what party they're from. I'm not going to ask people what party they're from when they come to me and talk about an issue. I want to represent all of them.
No, I think that's a great outlook to have as somebody who wants to serve the people. I mean, that's such an important. Talk to me a little bit about that. And I think people that maybe out there that don't know watching, you were a legislator for 8 years in the House.
Yep.
And then 8 years in the Senate.
Right.
As a Democrat.
Yep.
So you served as a Democrat all these years. You said just now, Douglas said, man, you should switch. Why? And you didn't want to at the time. Why now? And I'm not, I just want. What after your the rallies that we did down in Montpelier this last spring? I say we. I was just part of. I was there reporting on it and protesting too, of course, a little bit. But why now? What's been the draw? It's like what made you want to do those rallies, and what's driving you at this point?
Yeah, the last couple of years were just the final straw. The progressives have taken over the Democratic Party, and they're out of their mind. I don't know if any of them can do math. Because the math isn't working out for regular families' budgets. They're crushing us with the cost of living. And so I was a Democrat when the party took care of poor and working class people. And this party no longer does. They're taking care of the wealthy developers who give them campaign contributions in the energy world. $100 million a year added to our electric bills is basically a gift to their campaign donors. It's not going to do anything for climate change. It's not going to help Vermonters, but it's going to take more money out of Vermonters' pockets, and it's going to take the largest percentage of money out of the people who can least afford it, because study after study shows that poor people pay a larger percentage of their income in energy costs than wealthier people.
So when you talk about the just giving a gift to their campaign donors, who are some of these people, the campaign donors? And I think people, we get really, I'm guilty of this. I just talk about, special interest groups and nonprofits and, blah, blah, blah. But, who are we talking about? And I think you know the answer. I'm just...
Yeah, and I can't remember all the names, but if you look at people like David Zuckerman's campaign finance, or Phil Baruth, or Jill Korinsky, or any of the leadership, you'll see all their names. You'll see David Blittersdorf and Matt Rubin and Kriya Lintelak, all the board of directors on VPIRG, and I think we might have talked about this story a little bit the last time I was on, but VPIRG and their lobbyists were the ones that really pushed for net metering, and then the lobbyist goes out and starts his own solar energy company because it's, they're selling solar energy for 4 times market rate.
Is that Sun Commons?
Sun Common, and the board of directors, a bunch of the millionaires on the board of directors, put up the money for them to start the company.
I see.
From my from my perspective, it's corruption. It's legal.
Yeah.
It's not against Vermont law.
It's not against any law, technically.
But it's corrupt.
Yeah. I think the point that I'm trying to get out of you, I guess, is we talk a lot about this. I think myself, there's a lot of Vermonters, and I've heard you say this too. Vermonters don't know just how much this is going on, and I think it's somewhat a lack of coverage reporting on the media. Then there's a little bit of corruption, perhaps even within the media itself, and I mean that WCAX, VT Digger, 7 Days, like there's just some level of in my opinion, shrouded. Like you can't see what's going on exactly. Like we aren't told exactly. But I think it would take somebody like you coming along, the governor even potentially, and some of the currently elected officials that just came out and said, like, this is who the players are, this is where the money's going, and this is what they're doing with it. And I just don't think the people of Vermont hear this enough, and they don't even realize that that's an option for what people could do in government. They would think, why would anybody do that? Well, That's what they do.
Yeah. No, and so the media, even at one of the rallies, I spoke directly to the media and asked them to do better coverage, because the media seems to only have time to cover the talking points of the majority and the minority, and they don't have time to get in depth into the story. And that's really the only chance the public has of hearing the whole story. And so I've got a whole bunch of things I want to do as Lieutenant Governor, but I'm going to do an outline of 3 that outline the majority of what I want to do.
Sure.
I want to bring Vermonters, working class Vermonters, blue-collar Vermonters' voices back into the State House, because it's been missing for far too long. Legislators operate inside a bubble, and they only talk to each other and to lobbyists, and the lobbyists only represent the rich and powerful. That's number 1. Number 2, I want to dissect all of the legislation that is going to affect Vermonters, that's moving through the building, and put it into terms that everybody can understand, and make sure there's information there for Vermonters to know what their legislators are doing, how their legislators are voting, and how the legislation will impact them, especially their pocketbook. Thirdly, I want to help Governor Scott travel around the state and recruit more people to get involved in the legislature. We currently, from my perspective, do not have a good representative government. A good representative government should look like a cross-section of Vermont. When I first got there were a bunch of farmers. I don't think there's a single farmer left. There were a bunch of tradespeople. There's a couple tradespeople left. You need a good representation of the actual population of the state to do a good job representing the people. We have too many people that studied political science and then got elected and have no foundational skills. We have too few people who have run businesses, and they think, they can just keep going back to the well. Oh, everybody that runs a business is wealthy. And it's like, they don't see, like in my business in construction, and I got a ton of friends that are also in construction, they don't see the hours that you go out after work, after you've put your 10 or 12 hour workday in, and you go out and look at jobs and do estimates for nothing. They don't see the time you put in adding up the materials, sitting at home doing the estimates, all those things that you're not actually getting an hourly rate for. And like I said at one of the press conferences, a lot of us have our 40 hours in by Wednesday.
Yeah.
And and there's all these people in the State House that you've seen them work a legislative day. What do they get in? 4 or 5 hours of work, and then they all go home.
Yeah.
And that was one of the most frustrating things when I got to the legislature. I grew up on a farm and went into construction. We got up every morning and said, what needs to be done? You put your head down, you figure out how to get it done, and you work until you can't work anymore, and you go to bed and you start over the next day.
That's right.
And it was just so frustrating to to see what I thought was the lack of progress, the lack of a work ethic, the lack of getting things done.
So it's funny, and I think we really need to touch on that. Like, we should come back to this point. But when I talk to like my grandfather or his brothers or that generation as a whole, right? They're all Vermonters and have been for a long time, and they still consider themselves Democrats, right?
Yep.
And in my mind, when they are talking about Democrats, they're talking about somebody like you.
Yep.
And what I've been trying to get through to them, and hopefully they're out there listening, what I've been trying to get through to them is that the Democratic Party of the past, not only in the state of Vermont, but nationally too, is not the same party. Not even close.
Not even close.
And it's not even, so these words, Democrat, Republican, how much do they even really mean anything? I don't really hold it that dearly, you know, when I call myself a Republican. That's not something I would die for, you know?
Right.
But so I guess my point is, take me back to 20 years ago when you first got into the legislature as a Democrat. What was the Democratic Party like, and what was it like for you to be there in the legislature?
Yeah, it was much more moderate. It was really cool because the balance of Democrats and Republicans was pretty even, and there was a group of moderate Democrats and Republicans and a handful of independents that could swing the vote. So we had very balanced government. We had good legislation that was compromise legislation. It was really ideal. But most of those Democrats were older than me, and slowly they just kept aging out and aging out.
Kind of like the Bobby Stars of the world.
Yeah,
you know, and the Mazas, and you know, it's really too bad.
And they were the last of them. And, you know, Timmy Corcoran from Bennington joked with me this year he was going to draft up a resolution because he is now an endangered species. He's like one of the...
He could totally get away with that, too.
He's like one of the very last. There's another guy up, Dan Noyes from up in Wolcott. He's pretty good. But there are very few Vermont Democrats left, and my grandfather wouldn't recognize the party.
Yes.
Just like you say, your grandfather wouldn't recognize the party if he went to the party meeting and heard what
they were talking about.
He just wouldn't recognize.
That's what I keep saying. Like, I'm like, you know, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but I'm really passionate about this because it's like, guys, you don't get it. Like, it's not the JFKs of the world anymore. Like, it's so far gone from that.
Yeah.
And when you do spend time like I have this last year in that building, you see something a lot different than anything I've ever known. I mean, it's like, whoa, this is totally crazy. I've never seen. I mean, I'm a little crazy too, but they're like holy cow, you know. So
yeah.
Anyway,
I think one of the more interesting things on the campaign trail has been the number of people who came from families that have identified as Democrats for generations that feel the same as me. They say, my party has left me, I'm now a Republican, or I'm still a Democrat, but I don't agree with what they're doing. But especially noticeable up in Franklin County, where there are old, historic families up there that have been there for generations. They have always been Democrats. In the last couple generations, they're just all switching to be Republicans, and that was part of it. So another thing, you know, that I've never really talked much about, but is the discrimination I felt as a representative and a senator from some of the left in what was my own party. And some of the more liberal people were just, you know, kind of nasty, saying things like, you're not a Democrat. And it's like, you know, well, my family's been here and been Democrats longer than your family even knew where Vermont was. Why are you saying that I'm not the Democrat? And so it got to the point with some of them, you know, it was offensive, it was hurtful. And so it's unfortunate that some of them were that way. And I'll say, when Gay Symington was Speaker, she actually reprimanded the caucus because some of the conservative or moderate Democrats were being targeted by the liberals, saying, you're not a Democrat, why don't you switch parties? And she said to the whole caucus, she said, it's not acceptable. And anybody who wants to be part of this party and got elected as a Democrat is a Democrat, and they need to be treated with respect. And I have the utmost respect for Gay. She, I was a little more conservative than she was, but she treated me very well. And her and I had an open line of communication. And when I couldn't support something that they wanted, I would tell her, and I would tell my leadership. And, they were okay with it. But the discrimination's not okay.
No, and I'm sure that still exists. From what I understand, right now in the Democratic Party, they're so cutthroat, in the Vermont Democratic Party for that matter, they're so cutthroat that if you say vote a certain way on a bill or an override, they might even line somebody up behind you and run them against you.
And take you out in the
primary.
primary.
How do they do that? How are they so good at it?
They're taking you out in the primary, but that's what I have been preaching for 10 years. The primary is a serious problem across this country and is going to destroy our democracy.
I agree.
It is moving us to the extremes because the moderates get taken out in the primary. And from my perspective, the left and the right are off track with what the majority of Vermonters and the majority of Americans believe in. And need.
Yep.
But the parties have figured out how to drive people to this hyper-partisanship. And when we get to a primary election, a small fraction of the electorate comes out, and they usually pick the left and the right and eliminate the moderates. And if you look at a primary election, let's just say a state has a primary election, 20% of the electorate comes out, and the winner, let's say, gets, if there's a whole bunch of people in the race, could, win with 35%. 35% of 20% of the electorate is not many people.
It's not many people at all.
And so you've got a handful of people picking, like in Iowa last year, I think the caucuses, like 15% came out. And so you look at the numbers when a person, even if they get 40 or 50% of 15%, you're talking 6 or 7% of the electorate.
In Iowa.
In Iowa, who's picking
decides the president of the United States. It's pretty scary.
It is scary.
It's bizarre. Yeah, that actually tells you, it gives you an insight to maybe what they're doing, and who knows how they're pulling the strings in Iowa, for example, because it's very secluded state in the middle of nowhere. I mean, it's just like
it's a bizarre process.
What a target. Yeah, it's very strange. Okay, so I just want to add quick note on that. I remember when I ran for state senate in 2022, one of my friends, close friend of mine, one of my best friends, he goes, Paul, nobody cares about the primaries. That's for you guys. That's for you guys, you political guys. And I'm like, man, if only you understood how important.
And there's the problem.
And that it is the problem. It's an apathy thing, and I think it's a lack of just putting the idea that politics is somehow like a part of a personality, or like it's part of your, I mean, for some people it is, but everybody has a voice and a role in this. So it was kind of like, no, you don't get it. This is the reason why we keep ending up with the most hyper-partisan candidate.
Absolutely.
I think the reason they keep it this way, one of the biggest reasons they keep it this way, is because it's easier to raise money like this. Like I always say, they don't, like a two-party system, both parties would never want an independent candidate, because then it would ruin the polarization. They would rather their enemy won, because then the next cycle comes around, they'll be able to raise more money based off of that. So that's kind of my...
Well, and that's one of the interesting things, going back to the rally, and that's what I've been preaching for a while. You look, so I helped organize the rally with Mike Covey, who's a conservative Republican.
That's right.
And James Ellers, who is fairly liberal. I'm a moderate. Okay, there's the whole spectrum of politics covered. We had people in the audience, everybody from self-admitted socialists to very, very conservative people. And I said at the beginning, and this is what we operated under, I said, we're not going to agree on everything, but let's get together and work on the things we all agree on.
Yes.
And we pulled that diverse group of people together on the things that we agreed on. We agreed that the legislature is attacking rural people and the rural culture. We agreed that the legislature is driving the cost of living beyond the reach of most average Vermonters. Across the spectrum, people agreed with those messages and came out for us.
No, I witnessed it firsthand. You have put together a coalition of people that, I mean, I know all those people. I knew them all separately and before, so it's not just Mike Covey, but Allison Despathy, James Ellers. I knew a little bit of them all individually outside, but I mean, to see this group come together like it did was really something. Not just once, but twice.
Yeah.
And I think the message of tap trees, not Vermonters. Like what I think your ability, that what you've been able to do, it brings out like that side of Vermonters where ultimately this whole nationalization of politics to begin with, first of all, we don't really relate with, although it might be fun to, we don't really, we kind of see things as Vermont first in some ways. And I think that there's so many people out there. Like I have a friend who was just here the other day who he does a lot of the similar type of work that I do. And he says that, he has people that come to him about his page, and his page is similar to your lifestyle. It's like farming and, a homestead and like a agrarian lifestyle, if you will. And he's posting about it, talking about it. And he's like, I have people come to me all the time that's across the political spectrum that say, thank you so much for the work that you're doing.
Yeah.
And I think that probably resonates with you and what the governor and the work that he's been doing for the last 20 years. I mean, talk to me a little bit about that too. So you are working with the governor, or is...
Yeah, the governor's office has been helping us a lot, and like I said, they've endorsed us. They're going to help us out as much as they can because he wants a lieutenant governor he can work with.
Yeah.
And he can't work with David, and quite frankly, it's hilarious. So I just did a new radio ad on WDEV, and I don't know if any of you or any of your listeners have heard it, but so I went into WDEV, started doing some radio ads, and I never saw the article, but supposedly John Walters is taking me to task because I'm doing radio ads, and it's like, wait a minute. I'm running against an incumbent. How am I supposed to get my name out there? And isn't it legal to do radio ads? So I don't even get where the guy's coming from.
Well, he's just a wackadoo. I wouldn't take anything he says seriously.
No, and I don't because I've seen him operate. You don't get fired from both Digger and 7 Days because you're a good reporter.
No, he's very
partisan.
Yes, he knows what he's trying to do.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But anyways, 2 weeks later, Zuckerman's in there buying ads.
See, there you go.
And then I was down there recording a new ad a couple days ago, and Greg Thayer's coming in to do ads. And so it's hilarious. So my last ad, I go, hello, radio listeners. Hope you all don't get sick of political ads because since I started, others have followed. And some of them are using my message. But what they don't have is Governor Phil Scott's endorsement. And I went on to read the endorsement and just had a little bit of fun with it. But it's quite hilarious that, I started, and David, he's saying now he wants to amplify Vermonters' voices. He's had 8 years and he hasn't amplified Vermonters' voices. And you know where he got it? He got it from John Rodgers, because our slogan at the bottom of our sign is a voice of working Vermonters. And that's what I want to be. And that's something David can never be. When you're a millionaire, born with a silver spoon in your mouth, handed every privilege, you don't understand the people that are working their butt off to make enough money to pay the bills that are already piled up on the desk from the week before.
That's right. Yeah, well, I mean, I will say, partisanship aside, like I obviously swing a little bit more to the right, and watching somebody like you come along, and I mean, granted, whatever happens in the primary is what happens.
Yeah.
But I want to see a formidable candidate to go up against this guy, and it seems like to me, and maybe you can speak on this a little bit too. It seems like the Democratic Party has issues with Zuckerman too, and you might know a little bit about that, or I don't know.
I've never been, like I said, I've never been a party insider because so many of them discriminated against me. Yeah. Why would I go hang out with them? But yeah, one of my friends told me that he wanted to be a delegate to go to the convention, and he ran for that position and didn't get it. So that says something about his popularity
within the party.
Yep. And quite frankly, he's not a Democrat. He's never been a Democrat. And back to when Gay Symington was Speaker of the House, David was the biggest thorn in the side of Democratic leadership. He was way worse than the Republicans. Every year when the budget came out, David would pitch these amendments to make himself look good and make the Democratic Party look bad with no revenue, no funding, and he knew they couldn't pass. But he did it to make himself look good in the eyes of whoever he was pitching it for, and he did it to make the Democratic leadership look bad. And it's like, that's not how you operate.
No, I think I've had a handful of instances running into Dave Zuckerman, and from what I've gathered, he doesn't have much of a relationship with Democratic leadership, even though he technically is Democratic leadership, and maybe not even progressive leadership too. And from what it sounds like to me, and Dave, you're invited on the show if you want to come explain yourself, but what it sounds like to me, it's a lot of you say one thing to one person or one group, and then you say one thing to the other, and he's done this too many times, and then it's really caught up to him. You can only weave a web so intricate, right?
Exactly. You can only play both sides of an issue for so long, and he's been in it long enough, so it's catching up to him.
Yes. So I just want to mention that quickly, there's the story that's come out of VT Digger, which is written by Sarah Mirnoff, who I have a little bit of a history with, along with Jim Danzano, the executive director of the party, for that matter. So I see very clearly what's going on, what they're doing. There's a story that's come out. Apparently Dave Zuckerman is, I can't even say it. It makes me laugh. It's just so ridiculous. Apparently Dave Zuckerman's been offering menstrual products to female legislators for the past few years, and apparently he's been reprimanded for doing this by Democratic leadership. So the Speaker of the House is now coming down on him and saying, this is wrong. You shouldn't be doing it. Do you have any take on that? Do you have any thoughts on that?
When I read the thing, all I could think is, what planet would this be acceptable on? I mean, it's just inappropriate. And, over the years, we've heard that Dave has been inappropriate in a lot of different instances. And, quite frankly, a public servant in his position should be smart enough to not engage in that. Yeah, it is absurd. I mean, everybody who read the thing is just left shaking their head going, what?
Yeah, that's what I mean. When it came out, I was just like, okay, this is one of the strangest stories in the news I've ever seen, in Vermont anyway.
Yeah.
Rob Williams Media, he comments, say it, tampons. Okay, I said it. Tampons. Yeah, I said it.
Tampons, period.
Period. There it is. I do have one comment from Kevin Ryan, and I'm pretty sure you'll be able to clear this up. He says, didn't John Rodgers' family inherit 200 acres of land? What's his issue with being born into a wealthy family?
I have no issue with being born into a wealthy family. And no, my family never inherited anything. My mom's family came to North America, Canada, actually, in the 1600s from France. They were farmers looking for a better life. My Scottish, Irish, and English ancestors came to Vermont in the early 1800s. My Scottish ancestors settled the farm in Vermont in 1838. And again, every single one of them were poor farmers from another country coming here to try to make a better life. No, nobody ever inherited or was given anything, including myself. I still have a $500,000 mortgage on my farm. I've worked my entire life to be able to even be there on the farm. Otherwise, it would have been sold out of the family. And unlike a lot of people in this state, I mean, I could chop it up and sell a whole bunch of building lots, and I could retire tomorrow. But I'm not selling my family's heritage. My family has been stewards of that land for almost 200 years, and my hope is to pass that down to my kids and grandkids so that there are more generations. Someday, humanity is going to realize that clean water and clean soil are the two most valuable things on earth, because you can't grow potatoes in gold.
That was just pure beauty what you just said right there. I resonate so strongly with everything that you just spoke to, because I have a similar family background. Family's been here a long time, and I feel the same exact way. Sure, property's worth a certain amount of money, but the way things are going, there's a reason why all these big banks and even countries outside of the United States are buying farmland in the United States. And, this state used to have hundreds of thousands of farmers, so I'm not mistaken.
I don't know how many, but it's a heck of a lot more.
I think it was like 60 or 70% of the state was farmers, and now it's like 2% or something like that.
And let's remember that the legislature ran much better when there were farmers there. And another thing I would say to that, the commenter, is not only has my family paid for the farm, not only did I go out and borrow $750,000 to buy the farm, we've got it paid down to just under $500,000. Woohoo!
Yeah.
And $22,000 in property tax last year. It's going up. What are we going up in Glover? 16%. So yeah, an extra like $3,800 on my tax bill. That'll be wonderful. But David Zuckerman, the millionaire, got the Vermont taxpayers to pay for his farm. He got land trust money from Vermont. I understand he got land trust money from somewhere else, and he just pulled all this stuff using taxpayer money to buy his farm. I bought my own farm.
Yeah, well, and Kevin Ryan responds, and I guess I don't think he maybe doesn't get what you're saying. He says, well, I don't get it. Rodgers resents Zuckerman's family for having money, but Rodgers got his land from his family. Sounds like to me you still had to buy the land, like you weren't just given anything.
Yeah, exactly.
Like that's what people don't get.
And I don't resent Dave for having money. I have friends that have money. It's not a resent thing. It's a different perspective. People who are born with a silver spoon in their mouth and have millions of dollars behind them don't have the same life experience. He never had to worry about making a payment. When he was in college, he inherited a house in Burlington and hundreds of thousands of dollars from his family. How much did you have when you were in college?
$0.
Exactly.
Negative.
Exactly. I had a
negative dollars.
I had a crappy car, and I went to work with a tiny bit of school debt, because at that point I was scared of debt and said, well, I better get to work and pay this off.
That's right.
And it's just that people who come from old family money have it easy, plain and simple. They have every privilege. I would have liked to gone to university. I didn't. I went to a 2-year school down in New Hampshire based on what I could afford. Then I started my own business and went to work. I mean, it's apples and oranges. There's just no comparison. It's not resentment, but people of privilege have a way easier life than people who start with nothing. It's not rocket science.
You're speaking music to my ears, because this is just, there's so many instances in my life, different relationships I've had, different friends I had in college. I go on and on about this. I always wondered, it's so hard for me to relate and argue with you, because I just know that you don't have the same experience that I've had. So how can what you're telling me just doesn't even compare to what the actual lived experience of people like me, by the way, are dealing with. And I think what we're talking about right now is like the most obvious problem in the State House.
Exactly.
That's exactly what it is.
Exactly. If you're not worried about your taxes going up $2,000 a year because you have plenty of money, how can you be worried about the family who's already on the edge financially, and that extra $1,000 or $2,000 on their property tax bill breaks the camel's back? That is what this is about.
And that's what I mean. I talk to so many people. People come to the Creemee stand here all the time. They want to talk about politics, and people say to me, I'm so thankful that I can swing it, that I can afford this.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people, this is their final. This is it. Like, they're going to leave Vermont even, and I've seen that too, by the way. I know multiple people have come to me and told me that they're leaving Vermont.
Yep.
And that's where I'm like, okay, so if you can absorb this, good on you. However, you should be one of the most vocal people out there saying, because eventually maybe you won't be able to absorb
Right.
it if the things keep going the direction that they're going. I mean, I can think of multiple instances, even here in Northfield, where people thought, hey, I'm good for the rest of my life. I got money. And things have just gotten ridiculous in the last 20 years, and now they don't have anything, and
Yep.
they're like, what's going on?
Yeah.
Why is it like this?
Yeah, no, and that's so I had to have shoulder surgery this year, and so I haven't been working for a few months. So I mean, we're running on empty right now, and we actually just advertised a piece of property for sale because that's probably what's going to get us through until my shoulder's healed. And I didn't want to sell that property. And this is actually an interesting case, Paul, because so the house that we moved out of when we bought the farm, we started renting, and we have this really nice young couple. They're like in their 30s, and we were providing them with a reasonably priced rent. Nice house on 100 acres of forest land. They absolutely love it. It's super private. But my property taxes on that house are $8,000 a year. By the time I add all the utilities and insurances and upkeep and everything, I'm barely making any money renting it to them, right?
Yeah.
And so we decided to sell because then we can take that money and put it on our mortgage on the farm and save a huge amount in interest. We're paying $21,000 a month in interest. Not a month, $21,000 a year in interest.
Still
now think about that. Let's just think about that for a minute. The people who come from wealth and privilege and have millions of dollars don't pay interest.
No, they
Right?
don't.
Because they have cash to buy things. If I had all the interest that I have paid throughout my life back, I could probably retire tomorrow. and so that's what I'm talking about. It's a whole different world. But yeah, so we're going to sell that property. Most likely, it'll be an out-of-stater that buys it. That's one more affordable rent gone because the cost of carrying it got so high.
Well, and what's funny is that there's probably people out there right now who would say, well, you're selling it. How could you sell? It's so terrible. But it's like, but he has to, because this is the situation. What I do love about everything that you're saying, by the way, is you're so transparent about the life that you're living. I mean, you're right there.
Absolutely.
You're right there with every single one of us. And so people that think that he's not, well, he's explaining it pretty thoroughly.
And that's another thing about me. You ask the people who have worked with me for the last 20 years in the State House, the people who have known me my entire life. I'm a hardworking, honest guy. I'm an open book. I don't pull punches. I'm not trying to hide anything on anybody. Ask me a question, you're going to get an answer.
Yeah. I think that's a beautiful thing. So I have some people writing in, and we always are sure at Creemee Cast to give people a little shout out if they write in. We want you to write in, guys. We want you to be part of the conversation. That's why we're doing this. I enjoy it. I think it's a lot of fun. Rob Williams, he writes, food, fuel, finance, free Vermont. He spelled finance wrong once, and then he corrected himself. Stu Lindbergh, he writes, while I respect Rodgers' defense of liberty in regards to the right to bear arms, I worry that he does not understand, somebody just changed it, that he does not understand that his support of big government centralization and consolidation is the surest way to lose all of your liberty. Stu, I would appreciate an expansion on that comment. What do you mean by that? Because I don't think John said anything of the sort.
No, I'm not a big government guy. In fact, along with streamlining education, we need to streamline government. The bottom line is we have created a system that Vermonters cannot afford, both our education system and our government system. We need to provide services, we need to provide education, but both of those systems need to be looked at from top to bottom, just like a big business would do. If a big corporation is losing money, they send in some guy that specializes in, okay, where do we trim the fat? Who's not pulling their weight?
Sure.
No, I'm not a big government guy. I'll tell you a good story about that. I was in the Senate coat room one day, and a bunch of Democrats were talking about a bill, and one of them was Allison Clarkson. And I looked at Allison and I go, if you guys keep going, government's going to control every aspect of our life. And she said, well, that's what government's supposed to do. And I looked at her and I said, Allison, no, it's not. Government is there.
They think that. They actually think that. That's the scary part.
And that's the direction Vermont is going, where you're going to have to pay a fee and ask a bureaucrat to do anything and everything. And I do not support that. No. I am a libertarian when it comes to that sort of stuff. Government should not have a say over anything we do with our own body or anything we do on our own property unless we are doing damage to someone else.
Yep. I think that's a well put.
And so I'm not sure where he got the big government thing, but I'm a small government guy.
I think that maybe some of the information that, it's just coming out. It's a Timothy Page, he writes in, and putting what Thayer said aside, putting all of what's been said aside, what does John say to the Republicans we have heard from who are concerned about his past liberal record when looking at the primary election? So putting Thayer aside, what would be, like, if people just wanted to go look and see for themselves, they might say, man, he's a liberal. Well, what would you say to them?
You will not find me having been liberal on issues of money or big government. On people's personal freedoms, I support every single person's constitutional rights. Don't care what your race, creed, color, religion, sex, sexual orientation, political perspective, or any other identifier is. Everyone has the right to exist and be their best self, and government should not tell us what we can and can't do with our own body. So I'm not sure what he's talking about. Liberal, I mean, yes, some of the conservative Republicans probably don't like all my positions on what I just said, because I believe that the LGBTQ has as much right to be their own person as I do or you do, and I know some of the more conservative people may not like that, and that's fine. That's their prerogative, but I truly believe in protecting every person's constitutional right. I truly believe in freedom of religion, and I know some people try to force their religion on other people. The foundation of freedom of religion is everybody can practice any religion they like or no religion at all.
Yep.
And that, to me, is very, very important. People's personal space, to me, is very important.
No, that's very well put. And I think what we're seeing and what we're hearing, I think that people are just hearing stuff. I don't know.
Well, and don't forget, don't believe everything you hear. As I said, I'm an open guy. You want to give me a phone call, I'll take the time to have a conversation with you, and I'll answer your questions honestly. That's why I'm here. That's why I'm doing. That's why I'm doing interviews. And that's it. I'm not going to hide from anything. I never have, and I won't.
Well, and I think that's a beautiful thing, because I think just a little bit on the subject of media and how things have changed in the last 20 years. I mean, this is, as far as I'm concerned, this is the way things are going. People sitting down, having long-form conversations where somebody can actually sit down and make their point and not be worried about, getting the perfect soundbite within a 5-minute segment. They're going to turn into a 30-second, whatever. So you have more of an opportunity to explain yourself. And I think that people that are paying attention to the political world, they very much appreciate this nuanced version of communication. I think we're learning now more than ever that what we hear about Republicans and what we hear about Democrats is a lot more the media's doing on both ends, because
and
the parties because of that idea that I just mentioned earlier about fundraising and polarization and trying to pit us against each other ultimately.
Well, and I think ultimately, if we look at the rally as a success, right?
Yeah.
What if all Americans could do that? What if they could put the Republican Party and the Democratic Party aside in all their fringe ideas and focused on what we had in common? And that's what the wealthy don't want us to do. That's what the political parties don't want us to do. Because if we focused on what we had in common, we would find out there is more we have in common than divides us.
Absolutely.
And we would be powerful. And that's what America needs to do. That's what Vermont needs to do. We need to come together on these issues we agree on, and let's get them settled, and then we can have a discussion on the other fringe issues that different people have. But let's focus on the meat and potatoes and get this settled.
No, I agree. I think as much as we can kind of like rein in as much as our own resources, right? Like, grow your own food. That's something I know you believe in. I believe in. Grow your own food. Try to maintain your locality, your land, everything as much as you can.
Support your neighbors.
Support your neighbors. Spend money locally. I know that's such a buzzword, but it really is true. I think as much as we can, kind of like take our eyes off of what's going on in the crazy world that we live in and just focus on each other and the people around us. Whether they're, like you'd said earlier, no matter their religion, their color, their sexual orientation, there's a whole list of things, because that ultimately, we're all just humans, man.
Absolutely.
We're all just human beings.
If I see somebody off the side of the road in the winter, I stop and I don't ask them what party they're from.
Why would you?
Right?
Yeah.
I say, do you need help?
Yes, of course. Of course. Yeah, and we've become so ridiculous. It's like we've just lost sight of that. I don't know. I don't know why. We do have a question from Rob Williams. He writes, a couple things. He writes, they used to hang usurious bankers in the Middle Ages.
They used to hang a lot of people, Rob.
He also says, how about a Vermont Public Bank to loan money at low/no interest rates? ? What would you think of that? That's a challenge. The state, it's a new concept.
Yeah, the state really shouldn't be involved in banking. I mean, there's an important point there, though. When interest rates get raised, rich people stop borrowing.
Yeah.
But so do poor people who need credit and can't afford it. So it would be nice if there was a way where there was a means test where people who had less could get better interest rates. Because like we talked about before, if I ever added it up, it would blow my mind how much interest I've paid over the years. And that's the only way people can get a start. When you start with nothing, it's like I started my business with a rusty Chevy Blazer and a bunch of hand tools and some ladders. And I started building brick and block stuff with an old mason who taught me the masonry skills, right? And so once I made some money, I bought a better truck. I bought more tools. I bought a few power tools.
Sure.
Eventually, I bought my first little tractor. Eventually, I bought my first dump truck, then my first excavator. But I started with nothing. And every single one of those steps of the way, first off, I had to build credit. Then I borrowed money, paid interest on every single one of those steps, get one thing paid off, go, okay, what's the next tool I need for the business? So people who aren't born into money, they have to start somewhere. And if given a chance, there's a lot of entrepreneurs. There's a lot of great ideas. And if they had access to money that didn't cost so much, we would have a lot more small business. We would have a lot more entrepreneurs, and we would be lifting people up. So I love the idea. The other worry I have is the state's not,
fiscally
really
responsible.
Well, they're not really efficient in providing services, and it would be interesting to see if there was any entity that could pull that off. But low interest rates for people that don't have a lot of money is an excellent idea.
I think there's a larger issue that Rob Williams is trying to get at. I know him pretty well. So there's a larger issue he's trying to get at, which is the banking system ultimately in this country is problematic for a number of reasons. And we're experiencing now a potential another recession, and they're talking about printing more money, and I just don't know how they could think that's a very good idea at all. But there's a whole conversation to be had about that, which probably is meant for another day. So there's a couple more things I want to talk about. I mean, you're going to Good Measure. Just maybe let people know again. You are going to Good Measure around 4. Around 4 o'clock.
What are we looking at?
It's 3:30, so we got a little bit of time, but we're getting there.
Yep.
So we're expecting yet another rainstorm.
Wow, I hope we don't get it, man.
I know, and it's sounding like we might get hit pretty hard here in Vermont again. I know as Lieutenant Governor, there's not a lot of I mean, it's not like you're able to. You can introduce bills.
Well, so that's the thing. I think the lieutenant governor's office, especially in the last 8 or 10 years, has been completely underutilized.
Okay.
Like I said before, David Zuckerman on his radio ads is saying, "Oh, we got to do something about property taxes." Why didn't he say anything the last 2 years? Why didn't he present the legislature any ideas? Why didn't he hold a press conference like we held a rally and say, Vermonters can't afford this? He never did anything, but after the fact, he's coming out because he's trying to get votes and saying, "Oh, we got to do something about property taxes." It's a complete line of BS. So, as lieutenant governor, I'm going to work with the legislature. I'm going to testify on bills. I'm going to work with senators to introduce bills, help develop bills. There's a huge amount that can be done as lieutenant governor, but people like Dave have used the position to promote themselves and haven't done a damn thing for Vermonters.
So that's what I was going to ask, and I think there is a whole conversation to be had about the lieutenant governor and what they can do. So as lieutenant governor, we're looking at potential floods. The state's been ravished now by 4 floods in the last year. As lieutenant governor, I mean, what can you do and what will you do to ensure that, there's a lot of climate change legislation that goes through that building.
We'll call it faux climate change.
Yeah, so I want to hear your take, because this is what's frustrating me, and it's frustrating so many Vermonters is, we hear this everybody's saying dredge the river, everybody dredge. If I could make a t-shirt, maybe I will make a t-shirt that says dredge the river and start selling it. But anyway, people keep saying that. Then you have a lot of people on one end saying, well, we need more green electricity. We need more green electricity. We need more solar panels. We need more wind turbines. We need yada, 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 you name it. And I guess my question is to you, they don't want us to dredge the rivers because they say that that's bad for the environment, which it is. It is. I won't even say that it's not. Biodiversity, there's reasons. But what about the humans, right?
Right.
And then secondly, so they say we can't do that, and then this solution is the only thing that we can do because it's the only thing that actually is going to do anything. But it doesn't actually do anything, especially when the solar panels come from China and they come from. So I guess my question is, what are we going to do about the floods? Yeah. What can we do about the floods? And what do you think we should be doing?
Well, we have to undo some of the damage that's been done in the past. Like you look at the city of Montpelier, they tried to put a river inside 2 stone walls.
That's right.
You can't control that river. And a lot of our cities and towns were built on riverbanks because they needed the power back then. And so there is a lot of work left to do to, restore floodplains and make sure the water has a place to go, because the way our topography is in this state, when we get a downpour, it's coming down hard and fast off those mountains to the little valleys. There are houses and buildings built where there should have never been houses and buildings, except that, back when they built them, they were relying on the river for power. And so it's all about resilience. It's like making sure our culverts and our bridges are big enough and rugged enough to withstand these storms that are coming more and more often. It's all about not rebuilding when houses get wiped out in places where they're probably going to get wiped out again. The whole argument about the windmills and the solar panels is just, it's silliness. That's not going to save us. I believe in renewable energy, don't get me wrong. But there's just a new study out I just read that said the mining of rare earth minerals around the world is putting over 4,000 species of fish, birds, and wildlife at risk. We know that over 70% of the cobalt that's being mined for batteries, from everything from our cell phone to electric cars, employs slave and child labor. They're cutting down the rainforest. They're destroying the environment and the people of the Congo so people here can drive Teslas and pretend they're green. If you're using child and slave labor, it's not green.
No.
Solar panels, and then the cobalt goes to China, where the batteries are built, where the labor force is exploited, where the environmental standards are not up to snuff, and then it's shipped over here on a giant freighter that burns crude oil.
Yep.
That's not green. Solar panels that are built in China with coal power by labor that's abused in an environment that's abused, that's not green. If we can build responsibly, windmills, solar panels, whatever it is here, and use labor that's paid fairly, live up to environmental standards, use responsible power to build it, and then put those solar panels up on the built environment, put them over parking lots, put them on buildings, I can support that.
Yeah.
But think about this. Nobody wants to talk about how much heat's coming off those black panels on an 80-degree sunny day.
Somebody said that to me recently, yeah.
You take the difference. A grassy field or a forest is absorbing and diffusing that heat, right? The plants are absorbing it and using it for photosynthesis. The black panels aren't.
No.
They are increasing the temperature dramatically. And I actually saw an article from a guy, he did his whole pedigree and said, I am actually a rocket scientist. And he said that the large installations like they're doing in some places around the country can actually create their own environment, their own atmosphere, their own storms, because they're changing the temperature so much and so fast all in one place. And so there's ways to build sustainable power that work, and there are ways to build that power that do more destruction to the environment than help.
No, I think what you're talking about is just so, it blows me away when you go to these supposedly socially conscious people in Montpelier and you say to them, guys, this is where your solar panels are coming from, and they're burning coal to make them, which, by the way, that's real pollution as far as I'm concerned.
Real
Particulate pollution is like, that's nasty stuff.
Yeah.
That's what's really causing this, in my opinion, that's what's really causing this global warming. It's particulate pollution, amongst other things. But, yeah, I mean, it just, I had a conversation, I believe it was with Representative Maslin. I don't want to say, I hope I'm not saying his name wrong, but I believe that's how it said. And I was with Allison Despathy. We were right outside the Senate committee rooms downstairs.
Yep.
And we just asked him, point blank, but wait a minute. So you think that this is going to stop climate change, but like, what about this and the coal-powered plants and where they're getting all this stuff from? And he's like, well, I'd have to see some information on that. I was like, well, Allison's like, I've sent everybody. I'd send it to everybody. But that's like, it just blows me away how they're willing and able to turn the blind eye. Yeah, I just don't get it.
So get this. I did an interview with Vermont Conservation Voters, the board, right? And I knew I wouldn't get their endorsement, but I thought it'd be fun to have a conversation with them. Dave Zuckerman got their endorsement, even though he uses thousands of pounds of plastic a year and puts them in a landfill for his garden. And I use a biodegradable, certified organic plastic that costs me twice as much because it's good for the environment. Okay? But I mentioned the cobalt thing in the Congo, and they all looked at me like I was from outer space. How can the leaders on a so-called conservation environmental group in Vermont not know about what's going on in the Congo?
They have no idea. That's
what they said.
I think they don't know. I don't know. Maybe they don't.
How can that be?
I don't know. That's what I mean. It's like I've been saying this since I've been involved, like from the beginning. Since I've been involved 2 or 3 years ago almost now, saying, okay, well, there's got to be some people in this state that are just like downright bad people. Like they know what they're doing and they don't care.
Well, and that is part of it. They call the oil industry dirty. This industry is just as dirty. It's about money.
Yeah.
And if it were truly about saving the planet, I can buy in. But when it's greed driving it, no thank you.
So they call it greenwashing. That's the thing is, like I said from the start, and I had people push back, oh, no, they're just good people. They're misguided. Some of them are, I would say. Like Maslin, for example, I think he is. I think he's trying to do what's right.
I think he is. Yeah,
I like him, and there's a handful. There's a handful more of these Democratic legislators who I've gotten to know who they're fine.
Yep.
But there's a handful that I'm thinking of very specifically. In leadership positions like Baruth and Krasinski and these Democratic Executive Director Jim Dandino, like they don't serve the people of Vermont.
Well, and just like the so-called environmental group that I talked to, if those leaders don't know what's going on, they shouldn't be in those positions.
That's a great point. Yeah, it is. It's a very, very good point. So I want to just ask. So I know you mentioned you're working with the governor. Are you guys doing anything together, campaigning together? Are you guys like going places, events? Like what you guys been up to?
Yeah, we were at an event together last night over in Colchester supporting Pat Brennan for Senate.
That's
Pat
right,
and I worked together for years in the House. He's a great guy. They're helping us coordinate some stuff and doing some emails for us and giving us some guidance and helping us like that. I'm sure we'll do some more stuff together, but he's been super busy with all this flood stuff.
Right.
So, he's got his hands full right now, and we're busy traveling the state because I truly believe if we can meet enough people and I can talk with them and show them and tell them about who I am and what my hope is here, that we'll have no problem winning this election. But it looks like a small state on the map, but when you try to cover the whole thing, it's really pretty big.
Oh yeah, it is. Yeah, it's like we were talking earlier. It's like to go from Rutland, which is the southwest corner of the state, to the northeast kingdom.
It's a trek.
That's nearly 3 hours.
Yeah.
I mean, in some days, weather dependent, especially.
Yeah.
I have so many things more I could ask you about, but I know we're getting short on time. Have you worked at all with the Get Real team? Have you worked at all with the Get Real team within the Republican Party?
Not a lot. No, I've been at a few functions where a bunch of them are hanging out, and we've had some great conversations. Yeah, I mean, I think it's a great movement, and I think it's a great tagline. Get real is what people need to do, and they need to throw their partisanship away and get behind real people who want to really work for real Vermonters.
Absolutely.
That's a lot of real.
No, I love it, the authenticity. So this is the one question I will ask. Who are you supporting for president of the United States, if anyone?
Yeah, no, I've not decided yet. I will not support either Trump or Kamala. I've explained I didn't like Donald Trump before he ever ran for public office. I don't like the way he conducted business or has conducted himself. I'm going to say the same about Kamala Harris I said about Joe Biden. They are anti-Second Amendment. I do everything I can to protect the Constitution, and that means the whole Constitution, not bits and pieces of it, the entire Constitution. And so I cannot support someone who's against the Second Amendment. So I'm still really looking and researching, and I'll figure out at some point who I'm going to, but we know that it's going to be one of them. But I will not support the lesser of two evil. If there's two people that I think are evil or two people that I think are bad, I'll just skip it.
Why even bother? Yeah. How about RFK?
I like some of his stuff, but he's got some other stuff. I think he's a little out there. So yeah, I'm not. He doesn't really interest me that much.
I hear you. Well, I don't know if you've. I think I've covered most. Just one more question. Are you working with I know you're running as Republican. Have you worked with the Republican Party at all? Have you been working with like Paul Dame and any of their people?
Yeah. There's a whole bunch of them that have, been supporting me and giving me advice as far as working with them. Not really so much working with them, but staying in contact with them and, providing help and suggestions to them, and it comes back to me in the same way. But yeah, it's been very nice how welcoming most of the Republican Party has been to me. People like Paul and Deb Bilodeau and Rob Roper and Guy Page, and there's a lot of these guys that I know are to the right of me, and they know that, but they also know who I am. and they know that I'm the guy that can beat David Zuckerman, and so it's really been a warm embrace. I've been really, really impressed and humbled, quite frankly.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's really cool. Well, I think it's about time to wrap this up. You have anything else you want to say to the folks before we shut this down?
I just would like to say that I do love this kind of format because it's a conversation. I love the interaction from people calling in or texting in or whatever, because even like in the debates, which are good to help people get to know who you are, you got 30 seconds or 60 seconds or 90 seconds. It's really not very long.
Sure.
So appreciate the opportunity.
Absolutely. No, we appreciate you very much coming down to do this. And just let everyone know, John's going to be at Good Measure here in Northfield. It looks like I might have time to join you. We'll see. He's going to be here, and then he's going to be at the Republican Party's meeting, which I believe starts at 7.
Yep, that's at 7 at the library.
7 at the library. And so if you're in Northfield or if you're in Washington County, feel free to stop on by.
Yep.
Come on down to meet John, and come see what's going on here in the center of the universe, Northfield, Vermont. So everybody, thank you so much. Thank you for tuning in. This has been a Bean Studios production. I hope you enjoyed, and we'll see you tomorrow for Friday at 4. Thanks so much. Oh, and actually potentially Greg Thayer will be on tomorrow or maybe this weekend. Haven't gotten that sorted out yet, but hopefully, Greg, if you're out there listening,